Welcome back to I Taught English Abroad, and I'm really, really happy today. I get to bring my first ever guest of the podcast back for it's his second rodeo now. But I also bring back a guest who featured in the most recent season of I Taught English Abroad, who is a real hit with our fans as well. Two fantastic personalities that have so much in common, but also really different stories, really fascinating stories. To get them together in one podcast has taken a few emails, but far fewer than you think. Daniel Gillard, Rachael McGettigan, it's so great to have you back in the podcast. How are you both doing?
Thank you for having us back.
Yeah, great to be back.
Now, this is the first kind of multi-guest podcast that I've done. So, if you do find yourself talking over each other, that's fine. That's just, as long as it doesn't become, combative, then I think we're going to be okay. But we'll take it in turns for the first one. For those who don't, for whatever reason, might have not heard your respective episodes of I Taught English Abroad, can you kind of give us a little overview of what you're up to just now, where you are in the world, and how you've come to being on this podcast? We'll go to Daniel first because he spoke to us less recently.
Yeah, great to be back again. Thank you. I'm in Cambodia, still here, 8 years after getting my TEFL. And what am I up to these days? Since we last spoke, I've moved from the University of Putty Sastra, where I taught for over 4 years and ended up as the head of the department there. And these days I'm working for a lovely school called the Australian Centre for Education, right in the middle of Phnom Penh. I've been there for about 18 months now, and I do a lot of work with students who are preparing for IELTS, as well as general English teaching. And at the moment, I've just started teaching diploma courses as well in advanced academic communication skills. And it's a lot of fun. It's nice to be back in the classroom full time, which here is 22 and a half hours a week, which I think to a lot of Brits back home is not full time. So I'm very time rich. They pay me very well for what we do. They pay all of us very well. They're a really nice school, very laid back. They trust you to get on with the job, but there's always somebody there for questions. It's couldn't be happier. And on the side, I'm currently organising Cambodia's largest independent live music festival space called Nisat Market, and we're having a huge launch party on New Year's Eve with 8 live bands, 5 DJs, 24 hours of partying and celebrations with local and international bands. So I'm kind of getting back to my old job as a nightclub manager in a way, and dealing with the lunatics that are musicians in this country, foreigners and locals alike. That's proven to be a lot of fun. I love those guys. So yeah, we're trying something out in a jungle village in Western Cambodia right now, which hasn't really been tried before. So, yeah, the combination of the two, teaching and live music arranging, yeah, it's proven to be keeping me young and stressed and happy.
I think, Daniel, anyone who listened to your episode of the podcast will not be remotely surprised, but I think people who are encountering you for the first time will just be like, oh, what? He's doing what? Rachael, tell us about what you're up to, because since we last spoke, there's a lot's happened.
In India, in Varkala in India, I'm doing a 300-hour yoga teacher training course, which is 4 weeks of intense yoga training. We get up at 30 a.m. and we have yoga right up until 9:30 p.m. with like different classes, anatomy, meditation, philosophy, all of that, and of course physical. So that's where I'm now. I left Cambodia. The last time we spoke, I was in Cambodia teaching. I left at the end of July. We're finished up. So I left. I was traveling around Thailand for a while, and in India doing my teacher training. So back in Cambodia, I was teaching, for anyone that doesn't know or didn't listen to the last episode, I was teaching preschool English in Siem Reap in Cambodia. I was there for a term and I absolutely loved it. But it says the English teachers get paid quite well in Cambodia. The cost is cheap, so I'm very grateful that I was able to save up some money, and now I'm just traveling around and I'm jobless and it feels great.
Amazing. So again, You're both at very different stages of your respective careers, and so I don't expect your answers to be of the same length. Again, anyone who's listened to your previous episodes will know some of the story already. But this episode is going to be focused very much on kind of changing career. So with that in mind, I ask, we'll go to Rachel first. But what did you do kind of before you became a teacher? Before you even had the idea of kind of moving and traveling in your head, what was your life like beforehand?
Like many jobs, like a lot of people, I was going from job to job in my 20s. But then that was in Ireland when I lived in Ireland, and I moved to England then at the end of my 20s, and I was working for an engineering company. I was doing kind of marketing and graphic design for them. So it was a typical 9 to 5 job. It was in Earlham, so just outside Manchester. I was getting the train to work every morning. Very corporate. I didn't absolutely hate the job. I just hated the idea of like selling my soul to the corporate world. um, so then before in April, I taught English Abroad podcast to Daniel's episode. And Daniel lived in Manchester. We grew up in Manchester, near to where I was living, and he was speaking about Cambodia and just something about that episode and something about the way Daniel explained it. It just kind of like sparked something inside me, and I was like, oh my god, I want to do this. So up until then, I was working kind of corporate jobs, bar jobs. A friend of mine also, I told the story in the podcast, but a friend of mine was living in Spain, and she was working as an English language teacher. And I went to visit her, and I had the privilege of going in and meeting some of her students. She was teaching like kind of young teenagers. And I walked up to her and was like, wow, this is like, I could do this. Like, if it gave me, and how happy it made her, I was like, this is what I want to do. And I kind of forgot about it then until I listened to Daniel's episode. I reached out to Daniel. I couldn't find him anywhere on like Facebook or Instagram. I reached out to him on LinkedIn, I think. Just like, Daniel, I love the podcast. Like, it was really good. I just want to say, like, you're really inspiring, and I really appreciate that you went on that episode and like told your story. And Daniel basically was like, look, if you want to do it, you should do it. Come out to Cambodia. There's plenty of jobs here. I can set you some interviews and stuff. I took out off from then. I started my course then. I did it online. I went to Italy first. I thought I might as well see a bit of Europe before I went out to Asia. So I taught in Italy for a month in a summer school, and then I moved to Malta. I was living there for 3 years, and I was teaching English there at summer schools and also at an English language school. Malta is quite a prominent teaching world because it's an English-speaking country. They speak Maltese and English there. Obviously, the weather's a lot better than England, and it's a bit cheaper there, so it's quite easy to get English teaching jobs over there as well. So I was quite lucky to land 2 jobs while I was there straight away. Came to India, I'm doing it now, but I did it back then as well. But advanced training now. So it was actually this time last year I was in India, about to go to Cambodia to teach English. And then went to Vietnam, traveled Vietnam, and then I went to Cambodia. And with Daniel, my plan was to go meet Daniel, see Phnom Penh, and then maybe travel to Thailand for a while and then start work after Christmas. That was my plan. So I got to Phnom Penh. I was very happy to see Daniel. Everything was great. It was so nice to see him. We had such a lovely conversation. But I was like, I don't know if Phnom Penh is for me. And I was freaking out a little bit. And I was like, Daniel, I'm but I don't know if I want to live here. Like, I don't feel like this is for me. It was obviously it's a city, and I had moved out of Manchester to get away from the city. I was like, what have I done? I've thrown my whole life away. Daniel was like, right, calm down, go to Siem Reap, see Siem Reap, you're going to love Siem Reap, and leave it there. So I got to Siem Reap, and I was like, okay, this is so I ended up there then for the remainder of the time up until July this year, and I was teaching English to preschool students, and I absolutely loved it. So
fantastic. And Daniel, a couple of questions kind of arise from that. What was it like for you knowing that like you had such a direct impact on, what was it like knowing that it was someone reaches out to you to go like, oh, by the way, like I've done this and it's because I was listening to you talk. Like, is that quite a surreal thing?
It is on one level, and I keep thinking I want to say thank you to Rachel for being so nice, and I'm really sorry for messing up your life. Yeah, it's It is. It's really surreal. I think Rachel's forgiven me now and found her way in India. But no, I remember when Rachel came here and was saying, Phnom Penh it's an acquired taste. It's not everybody's cup of tea. It's not the most pretty city in the world, and it's a culture here for foreigners living here that's very social but very alcohol centric as well. If you like going out to drink and have yeah, exactly. And I always assume everybody's like me, a Friday, Saturday night party animal. And it's, yeah. I mean, I'm 44 and still dragging myself out at the weekends. And I'm waking up on Saturdays and Sundays feeling like death warmed up. So it's beginning to wear on me a bit as well. But no, I remember Rachel going up to Siem Reap, and I was really happy because that is Siem Reap's a best of all worlds kind of city in a Cambodian context. It's a city that's really a town. It's got a social scene. There are a lot of really great foreigners who live up there who can help you settle in. The local people are so very used to working with foreigners as well and have a lot of love for us. It's a very positive environment. But yeah, I've had it occasionally over the 9 years. Somebody's got in touch and said, "Can you tell me about teaching?" And I think back to the teachers who sat down with me in Phnom Penh when I was here for my first dedicated Cambodian holiday, and they just laid it all out for me as much detail as they could. And I promised myself that I'd always try and be as helpful as they were because they changed my life. I met a handful of teachers on a night out at a bar table. I was talking to the owner of a little bar, a gentleman from Leeds, and I was asking clumsy questions, I guess, and he just said, "Right, stand up, follow me over." And he popped me down on a table in front of a group of teachers, and he just said to them, "Yeah, he seems all right to me. Tell him everything he needs to know to be a teacher. And do you want another beer, mate?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay, cool." And 1,000 questions followed. These teachers, they knew everything. And it is very simple to move to Cambodia as well, which really helps. Immigration is not a huge hurdle coming in, but I know people have had experiences. I think I've been lucky when it comes to things like visa renewals, and I've had good schools who've dealt with that kind of thing properly. So on the whole, it was relatively easy. But I do always worry I'm sometimes too enthusiastic, and maybe I don't tell people about all the potential potholes and pitfalls of, abandoning your life in the UK and coming all the way over here. But for me, I don't know, 35-degree days, no such thing as winter. I do occasionally miss snow, but I'm half Austrian with family in the Alps, so I've got a solution for that. Yeah, I don't miss the cold, though. I just miss the white snow every now and again. That's about it on that front. But yeah, it's surreal to know that you have an influence like that. But then you got to think, well, we live in a world of 8 billion people and we all have to influence each other. It's the only way things are ever going to get better on an individual or macro level, I guess, is if we all try and help one another without getting too political. But yeah, I'm really glad I could help, and I'm always kind of surprised to even hear that I've helped.
I want your brutally frank opinions on this, and I'm not going to be upset because I've never taught English as a foreign language. In fact, if anyone's more, if anyone has a right to be annoyed by these particular opinions, it's actually yourselves. So I want your honest take on what you knew about teaching English as a foreign language before you became teachers yourselves, or before you realized it was a possibility for you. Did you have any preconceived notions about the kind of people who taught English abroad? And before you realized it was like, this is actually the kind of thing I can do, did you have like stereotypes in your head?
Yeah, I had. Yeah, I'd love to jump at this one. Before I discovered teaching was the primary route for a lot of people to come to Cambodia, I had very little idea about what being an English teacher overseas was about, but I did have a mental picture in my head of a 55-year-old white man with no hair who was kind of like a little bit washed out, a little bit fed up, might have been a teacher in the UK, might have been middle management or something, and was out here just kind of eking out a living in a bed sit or something. And then I remember starting the training with TEFL.org, and there were all these wonderful videos, and there was a particular teacher that they used in these training videos who was absolutely fabulous. And he was a middle-aged white man, but he was so enthusiastic, but he was also such a good listener. And I very quickly realized a big part of the job, which I still struggle with because you can never shut me up, is actually shutting up and listening to the students. And how they're forming their English and learning. And that kind of started to change my perceptions of what it is to be an English teacher. And then Coming out here, seeing Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, and meeting so many different English teachers, not only from the UK and the main kind of language countries for English, the USA, Canada, Australia, but also a tremendous contingent of Filipino teachers and South African teachers who really make you think differently about the language, its history, its impact, the small p political side of that. Where we all come from as English teachers is actually incredibly diverse, and not least of all out here, the Khmer teachers of English, who all go to university to get degrees in TEFL and masters in TEFL, and they put their whole lives into it. And I feel very blessed that all I had to do was a 140-hour Premier TEFL course with TEFL.org, and that was pretty quick as a native speaker. And compared to what the Filipino teachers and the Khmer teachers had, the hoops they have to jump through to do the same job that we do and the professionalism they show, and it is a much bigger academic achievement for them than it is for me. I have it easy. I've just got a PGCE at the start of this year, and that was still easier, I think, than doing a degree in English as a foreign language. We have the Institute for Foreign Languages here. Their courses are 4 and 5 years long. And a lot of these teachers are emerging as graduates, just like us, with student debt, loans to repay, all of that. And I think I'm very blessed. And that's something I've learned as a native English language speaker out here. I have it a lot easier than many of my colleagues.
That's really insightful. Rachael, what were your kind of impressions of the TEFL industry and like the kind of people who move abroad to teach English?
I'm being worried about is perceived, I think. Struggle that anyone goes through that decides to just quit their career and do something completely different, especially if it's moving abroad. So I guess just coming up to face with family being like, are you well in the head, are you okay, like you're mad, and my friends saying, oh, what about your pension and what about this and what about that. And so in terms of that, definitely those were the struggles that came up. In terms of previous ideas, it was only from what I had heard from other people who had taught English abroad or knew of people teaching English abroad, and it was kind of sometimes like, as always, focus on the negative. It was a lot of, oh, you're going to Cambodia to teach English, you don't even need to teach there, there's any wash-ups can end up there, and you're going to meet so many weirdos, and this was kind of the things I was getting, especially when I was in Malta, because there's like teachers from all over the world teaching in Malta, and they had heard about people, teaching in Cambodia in particular. But then Cambodia, just like I met some of the most amazing people. Like a girl we worked in the school, we ended up getting an apartment together. A girl from America, Emmy, like we were best friends. Another girl I actually made friends with. I just sadly found out this week that she actually passed away this week or last week.
Sorry.
So yeah, not to put a dampener on it, but she's from South Africa, and she was just so helpful. And you make these friends that are friends outside of work as well. They become friends from outside of work. The best people, and of course there was maybe one or two weirdos along the way, but I mean not any more than there was in Malta, or at least. So definitely when I got there and started meeting teachers, and as Daniel said, there's an influx of English language teachers, and they all kind of hang out together, especially in Siem Reap and stuff. And just like I was meeting, at random things, like comedy nights. My friend Princella, she ran a comedy night, and there was just all her jokes were like, hey, what about the English teachers? And everyone's like, hey, because it's just all English teachers. My opinion completely changed then. Not that I really met some of the most amazing people and learned so much from these people, because they're just coming from all walks of life, from all over the world. And yeah, as Daniel said, like working with Khmer teachers, and I don't know if Daniel probably gets the same, a sense of like this English teacher guilt, where the locals are getting paid a lot less than what we're getting paid, and as he said, they're jumping through hoops, they're having to do all these interviews and degrees, and they have to have a certain accent when they're speaking and everything, whereas for us it's like, oh, you have a TEFL and you speak English, great, okay, come on ahead. So changed, thankfully. I always make it a point to speak well about English teachers to other people now who are pursuing the career, because thankfully it didn't put me off, but it could have easily put me off.
Amazing.
Can I just jump in?
Absolutely, Daniel.
Just mention, I think, just to say how sorry I was to hear about Rachel's friend. If it's the same person, it made headlines across the country here this last week, and I never met her, but we had mutual friends, and I was really sorry to hear about that. It was quite a shock because it's very unusual. But anyway, I won't go on about it, but just to say, very sorry to hear about it.
We're just going to take a short break and we'll come back to talk more about changing careers in the TEFL industry. And we're back with Rachael McGettigan and Daniel Gillard. Now, I want to kind of open up kind of your story to sort of the more general kind of TEFL curious populace, if you wish. And I want to talk a bit about transferable skills. And now, don't worry, you're not in a job interview here, the two of you, but I was wondering, kind of applying your story to the people that are listening to this. You both made that transition into teaching English, having come from different kinds of careers. What transferable skills would you say you brought from previous roles that made you realise that you actually did have these skills in English teaching and you had stuff that you could bring? Whether it was really kind of direct stuff or if it was something, I don't know, they call them soft skills from other areas where you thought, oh, actually that's really handy. Rachael, we'll go to you for this one first. What sort of expected and unexpected things did you bring from previous life experience and from jobs that transitioned well into teaching?
Well, probably in terms of like soft skills and the more kind of technical corporate stuff, just the usual document skills, emailing, like how to speak to people and, in interviews, how to speak to other teachers, stuff like that. Probably coming from the corporate world helped in that. It also probably helped with my English because, I'm Irish, so sometimes our English isn't the best, even though it's our first language. That probably helped with that. And then in terms of unexpected ones is probably I was a dancer and a dance teacher for years, and that has definitely really helped with my teaching, especially with the preschool, but also with young children that I taught in Malta. Just being able to handle a group, being able to talk to children and know how to talk to them and how to communicate with them. I also spent a lot of time working in nightclubs, so sometimes handling young preschool children is the same thing as handling a group of Mancunians at 2 a.m. in Manchester.
Yeah, I can relate.
I'm sure, Daniel, you can agree to that, yeah?
Yeah, ex-nightclub man here, and the average customer at my club was about 75% as emotionally mature as a teenager. So, definitely a transferable skill set there.
And so, Daniel, drawn from your own experience, again, to draw from your podcast episode, you worked in politics, you worked in care, you drew from that nightclub experience there as well. What were the kind of, again, like I asked Rachael, what were the kind of expected and unexpected transferable skills that you brought to the classroom? The ones that you kind of expected would help, and the ones that made you go, "Oh, I didn't realize that would ever help me in this scenario."
Yeah, I mean, one skill that I'd had, I guess, it had developed through 25 years of being active in local politics and then becoming a local councillor was English. Like most native speakers, I had not the first clue about the rules of grammar, but I knew them. As a first language, it's in your brain, So, instinctively knowing them was some help. Also being able to write quite well. I'd often do speeches and newsletter stuff, but also public speaking. I've never been that afraid of standing up in a large room. Or I think the largest audience I ever addressed in England was 1,500 Piccadilly Gardens, which if you can do that, you can generally do a classroom of 30 kids, because 30 kids are kind of, especially Cambodian kids, wanting to like you, they're wanting to learn from you, they're patient and kind. 1,500 random Mancunians on a Saturday morning, hearing you through a megaphone, possibly saying things they don't agree with. That's a bit riskier. Formal speaking certainly helped. Being an ex-club manager at Antwerp Mansion nightclub, that certainly was a lot of people handling skills, and some people slightly misbehave in nightclubs. You might be shocked to hear. And knowing how to deal with that in an appropriate way and just knowing how to deal with that without escalating stuff. If you do occasionally have a kid who's not really behaving and not into it, it's knowing what level to go in at, and that's usually the lowest level you can go in at to say, hey, what's up? Are you okay? Why aren't you listening to me? Why are you throwing things at me? Oh, whatever. That's never happened, by the way, in 8 years. Nobody's ever thrown anything at me. Wow. Yeah. Yeah, Cambodian kids, 99.99% of them are very gentle. So that helps. Certainly, working in children's services, child protection, knowing that children are vulnerable when they're in a classroom and when they're learning a language, they're emotionally vulnerable because they really fear getting things wrong, just like adults do. And I work mainly with teenagers and young adults these days. And I always bear in mind that, and this came to me from working closely with very vulnerable children, that listening is important, having a kind response. At the end of the day, it's an English class, it's not brain surgery, life and death isn't on the table. So just reminding them that if they get something wrong, A, I'm pleased with them for getting something wrong, and B, the world is not coming to an end if you screw up a test or if you fail a course. Even it's just a course. It's not the end of your world. It's not the end of your life. And trying to constantly reassure my kids who are very driven and driven by their parents to do well, because English is a route to a good career. English is a route to a decent income and a stable life for a lot of kids. And the difference here between rich and poor is stark. There are Bentleys, there are Porsche 911s driving the streets of Cambodia, and they pull up at traffic lights, and they're directly next to homeless people picking up trash cans. There's a gulf that makes it's eye-watering between the rich and the poor here. And parents are so dedicated to getting their kids into schools, and they are often in schools 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. So when they come to my class, I like to make it a space where they can relax. And again, being a club manager, again, child protection work, being a calm and reassuring face, that's 3/4 of it. The other quarter is the learning the English. That bit comes easy once you've set the room, and if you've made a good plan and you know what you're going to teach that day. And if you get through half of what you want to teach, the rest can go to the next lesson. As long as they're walking out at least as happy as when they walked in, and then you've got them for another lesson. Once that relationship goes downhill, you've really got to work to get it back, so don't let it.
So you're both teachers at very different parts of your careers, but there's something you'll both very easily relate to, and that's kind of early nerves. So from both a teaching perspective and as people who'd moved to the other side of the world, how did you deal with early nerves? I mean, you've made these massive life decisions, but you've made them in a really informed way, and you've done it with conviction, you've done it with a plan, but even then, I think even with the best will and all the research in the world, you probably still feel a bit like, oh, when you make such a big decision. So how did you deal with those kind of early nerves, if you had them, and was it actually a better experience for having overcome those kind of early fears? I'll go to Daniel first on that one.
Sure. Yeah, there were a lot of early nerves about going into the classroom, and in the build-up to leaving the UK as well, I felt it was always going to be the right thing to do. I'd set in my head that I'd go for a year and then see where I was up to. And then I spoke to family, and I've been through a lot in the last few years. We lost our mum in the family. I'd been elected to Manchester City Council for 4 years, a lot of highs and lows, managing a club, etc. And then all of a sudden I was like, right, I'm going to Cambodia, everybody. And amazingly, the reaction wasn't all, are you insane? There was a few people who are like, where? What? Are you crazy? But my family were incredibly supportive. But that was because I think I was open with them. As much as I was enjoying life in Manchester, I felt the need for a new challenge. Cambodia cropped up in my life very randomly. But getting out here, it was between landing to move here, and I moved to Otras Village near Sihanoukville, and getting my first job at EIS school, small school in Sihanoukville. Took only from landing to my first day in the job was 3 weeks, which is a really nice period of time just to get yourself mentally ready. I was living in a bungalow 50 meters from the ocean in a village full of creative, artistic people. And then in I walked as the kind of Mr. Normal compared to some of the people in that village. But they were really, really, really reassuring. They're like, don't worry, many people have done this before. You're not the first, you won't be the last.
So, Rachel, when you first kind of moved over and started living and teaching abroad, what were the kind of did you experience any kind of early nerves? But mentally, when did you sort of know that you were kind of ready to do it? Were there any sort of challenges you had early on in terms of readiness, or were you just like, right, let's do this?
So I didn't actually stand in front of a classroom for the first time until I was in Malta. I was teaching kind of teaching English in Italy, but it was at a summer school, and I was just an or like a activities coordinator. So I had been in classrooms and kind of shadow teachers, but my first time standing in front of a class was in Malta, and it was a summer school. And it was these kids. They're like 24 of them, I think, and it was their first day at the summer school. And the first time I stood in front of them, they were getting level tested, and their level testing was being done on paper, and also I had to level test them by just asking the whole group different questions. So I went to the staff room that morning. I was so nervous. I had never done it before. I was told that this school like plan the lessons for you, but I hadn't been given a lesson or anything. So I walked in, and the Maltese are very to the point. They're very abrupt. They're like basically just very to the point. So I walked in, and the teacher handed me like a pile of paper and was like, "Oh, hello, you must be Rachel. Here you go. This is your classroom." And I was like, "Okay." And she was like, "Yep." And she was like, "You just need to give them these tests and make sure they don't cheat. And then you ask them these questions. And then you have to say if you think they're this level, this level, this level." And I was like, "Okay." I was like walking in being really giddy because I was so nervous, and I was like, "Hi guys, how are you?" Like I was just like really over the top. But I think getting thrown in the deep end so fast kind of took away the nerves. And I realized that when they were asking me questions about myself, I was like, they don't actually know it's my first day, and I just need to kind of go in there with full delusion and fake it until I make it, basically. I got to be like a strict teacher on my first day, which I didn't plan on being, but because I had to make sure they didn't cheat and they were trying to cheat, I was like, guys, we're trying to be the cool teacher, but also making sure they weren't doing what they weren't supposed to be doing. So I think, yeah, that definitely took away the nerves straight away. And then happened for my first 2 days, I was like level tested. I was a little bit nervous as to whether I was level testing them properly, and especially because I had never taught English before, I wasn't really sure if I was capable of doing that. But one of the other teachers kind of explained to me, look, if they're put in the wrong level or the wrong class, they'll soon know, the teacher will know, and then they'll be dropped down or moved up. So that kind of took those nerves away. And then teaching the first lesson then was thankfully easy because, as I said, the summer school provide the lessons for you. So I just had to kind of create the slideshows and make them look pretty. And I'm a graphic designer with my little side hustle. So that was the fun part for me. Definitely, I was so nervous when I walked into the building, but then they were just like, yep, here you go. And the nerves were just gone, I think. And the kids were just so great and so funny that it just took all the nerves away.
And I think, one of the things that when we talk to prospective teachers who just aren't sure whether or not it's for them, I think they may be worried that they're going to move and they're going to feel really alone, especially if they're, not so much in terms of teaching online and stuff like that. That's a different kind of career change. People want to have that kind of location independence, but especially in terms of teaching English abroad, people maybe feel as though, okay, but all my friends and family are here and I don't know if I want to kind of feel that kind of solitude. But from what you've both kind of indicated thus far, that's not been the vibe at all. So what was the kind of support like around you when you started teaching? It sounds as though there were people you could rely on. Even if they were very straightforward with you, Rachel, you could at least talk to them and ask for advice. Daniel, I remember you telling me about there was a Hollywood actor that was that you worked with early on as well. For both of you, if you could kind of tell me about the network of people that you had around you when you started teaching and when you realized like, okay, I'm not on my own here, and there are people around me who can help, because I think that's something people worry about.
Absolutely, yeah. The Hollywood actor is the great Jeff Siggins. He worked with me at the university here in Phnom Penh. I believe he's in Iraq now. He's 82 and he's still teaching in Baghdad. That was the last I've heard from Jeff. But yeah, he was one of the many characters. There's so many interesting characters of the English teaching world. But also Cambodia is a country blessed with many an eccentric foreigner. Wherever you go in Cambodia, there seems to be somebody from overseas who's got an amazing life story, or you meet such a range of people. I know tattoo artists here. I know engineers here. I know a guy who worked for Dynarod for 40 years and has moved out to support his family who are living here. You name it. It doesn't matter what career or background you've had. Those first days can be intimidating. They can be overwhelming a little bit. Loneliness is something I've never really had to contend with in Cambodia because there's such an alive community here. And people are very aware that if you're a new arrival, you're going to be feeling nervous, you're going to be feeling a little intimidated. And most people are very, very supportive because most people in life in general are very decent. The same rule applies overseas as it does in the UK. I think at least 95% of people you meet in the UK, they might not be your best friends or anything, but if you're in trouble or you've got a problem, most people will cross the street to help you. Most people will go out of the way to help a stranger. And I think most people are decent. And certainly in Cambodia, the same applies. So yeah, in terms of homesickness, I mean, honestly, there are times when we all miss home a little bit. But I've been out here now 8 years, and as a tourist, bang on another year, make it 9. This is home now for me. But those first couple of years, I bounced back and forth a little bit between England and Cambodia, but came to the realization this was home, or this should be home, because there's so much to do here, and there's so much fun to be had. But don't get me wrong, I'm not going to sit here and claim I never felt homesick. There are times you miss family, but we're quite lucky in Cambodia these days. The internet connections are at least as good as the UK's in Phnom Penh anyway. I can always call my cousins, my sister, etc., or my best friends back home. One friend I mentioned to you in the break, I talk to him on Messenger 3-4 times a week. We just chat, whatever it might be. We talk about news, life. So these days there's less of a disconnect. But don't get me wrong, there are moments I'd love to be, if I see a big night out amongst friends going on in Manchester, I think, it would be nice to be there. But equally, I think my very best friends have flown out to see me here. My sister's been out to see me. And as time goes on, those closest friends are also here as well, I've met a lot of people who mean a hell of a lot to me here now, local and foreigner. And when you live in a society like that, compared to the Western world, some loneliness, some solitude. Solitude can be great sometimes, but the loneliness is minimal if you're lucky enough to, meet the right people, integrate a little bit. And I speak a little bit of the language, a tiny bit, just enough to get by. It's a really tricky language, Khmer, but yeah, I want to learn a lot more in the new year, but I say that every year. And that helps if you can pick up a bit of the local language. But if it is Cambodia, most everybody speaks a few words of English, and it isn't an official language here, but the government releases everything in English. The street signs are in English and Khmer. So there's a lot of little bonuses to living in this particular country where English is looked upon very favourably. So, yeah.
And Rachel, you touched on earlier, you'd managed to make friends really quickly and really, really good friends. You had that sense of community wherever you'd been teaching. How quick was that to establish for you? Because you seem like Daniel, like a very outgoing person, someone who finds it quite easy to make friends. Is that a fair assessment? Did you feel a bit of shyness at the start when you'd moved abroad?
When I first moved to Italy, we were living in the mountains in North Italy, and all the teachers stayed together in rooms. So we were kind of thrown together and we had no choice but to make friends. Thankfully, everyone was so lovely. Like, there was a group of, I think, 8 or 9 of us, and they had like dinners with us the first few days and some training and stuff, and everyone just instantly bonded. Then in Malta, same again, like I was lucky to meet, you'll find Irish everywhere. I was lucky enough to meet a girl from Ireland on my first day in the staff room just before I went to the class. And then another girl from England, as well, and we just made friends and stayed friends. And I think when you meet other English language teachers, it's very common for them to have the same frame of mind as you, views as you, the same kind of path that they want in life, or like lack thereof, because everyone's kind of in the same boat. So I think it is quite easy to make friends in this career because everyone is kind of in the same boat. Everyone's out here without their family. And when I was in Malta, I remember getting kind of a bit lonely towards the end, and I think it was just I went sightseeing. I kind of crammed everything in. Of course, as always, you live somewhere and you avoid all the touristy places, and you're like, oh, I'll get there somewhere someday. And then the final week, I just went to every church, every mosque, every beach in Malta. My final week, and I remember talking to my Auntie Maria and saying, this is the first time in my life I've felt lonely. But I think that was just not being able to share the experience I would happen to be having that day with someone else. But I could have easily asked one of the girls with me. I had chose to go there myself. And I think that's the only time really in Malta that I experienced loneliness. It was kind of self-inflicted because I thought I would have enjoyed it more by myself. Then in Cambodia, as Daniel says, solitude is great. I spent a lot of time on my own in Cambodia. Like, I was lucky enough to have a beautiful apartment with a really nice swimming pool. I was kind of a little bit more outside of the city, and I, spent a lot of time by myself, which I really enjoyed. But also, I had that community of English language teachers. I'm also quite lucky that I have a deep interest in yoga, and like there's yoga communities everywhere. I was also teaching yoga, in Cambodia. So I was, going out for dinner with my students. Like, I would teach a yoga class, and then I'd end up having dinner with like half the class afterwards, and that was happening maybe 2 or 3 times a week. So yeah, in Cambodia, I was nearly trying to get away from people. Like, there was too much going on. I was like, okay, I'm going to spend some time by myself. And luckily, that was quite easy to do. So yeah, I think the last time I've really felt lonely was those few weeks in Malta. And I think maybe I had been traveling about 4 months at that time, and it was still kind of trying to get used to the thought of not being at home. And, I have a little brother and sister. My sister's only 16 and my little brother's 10. So, I missed his first communion, and I missed the birth of my auntie's baby. And like, obviously, times like that, you do, you feel like a part of you feels like you should be home, and but everyone at home understands, and they're happy for you, and you're like, oh, it's just not the same, like they don't understand. And those are probably the times now that I do feel loneliness, is when everyone's getting together, or when there's group family pictures getting sent into the family group chat, and then I'm sending a picture of myself on the beach in Thailand, and they're so yeah, it definitely, yeah, as Daniel says, everyone misses home, but I think the benefits of being away kind of outweigh that. As he said, that it's very easy to call home now. Like, I remember when my granddad was alive, he was a great storyteller, and I remember him always telling this story of how he had left to go to Scotland to work in Scotland, but there was no phones back then. There was no iPhones, there was no WhatsApp. So he left to go to Scotland, and his family didn't even know he had arrived safe until 3 weeks later, when they received a letter to say he had arrived. And like, you think now, you're getting on the boat, you're like, I'm on the boat, you're landing in Scotland, I'm in Scotland, like, everything's so instant. I'm so lucky in that way. And as Daniel said, the internet connection is great in Cambodia, and there's FaceTime, WhatsApp, everything. Like, my family are they probably hear more from me now than they did when I lived in Ireland.
Amazing. We're just going to take a quick break, and then I've got a final set of questions for Daniel and Rachel. And we're back with Rachael McGettigan and Daniel Gillard. So again, this podcast is this episode's very much focused on people who want to change careers, the people who have fears, who have worries, who have excitement, who have ambitions, but also, this got this really interesting kind of melting pot of emotions. And there's no point denying that people have fears and worries about teaching English abroad, about changing career, and we touched on it a little bit before, but speaking directly to that, what were your kind of immediate fears about changing career, and how did you overcome that? We'll go to Rachel first in this one.
I think I touched on a little bit earlier about how I had friends and family at home focusing a lot on the lack of stability, the lack of income, the lack of a pension, the usual stuff. And when you hear that a lot, and I probably wasn't even hearing as much as I think I was. It was just like going round and round in my head, and I was probably hearing it from myself. That was definitely like a fear I had going into it. Now I'm sitting here with no job, and I'm the happiest I've ever been. And, I don't know what my next job's going to be, but I'm so lucky that I have this TEFL now. And I know that there's countries everywhere that you can teach English, that are crying out for teachers. And I just need to decide someday, okay, I'm going to start working again, and then apply for jobs. And I don't think there's many industries that, you can say that. And we're very privileged that we're, English language speakers, that our first language is English, and we know we kind of have the upper hand in that. So, any fears that I had before of finding myself unemployed, or, not having enough money to get by, or, not having that stability, it's just, that fear is completely gone. You have so much support. Your family are always there to support as well. They're so everyone's so impressed by what I'm doing, and so happy about what I'm doing, that they're always encouraging me to stay out and keep doing this. And as I said, the biggest fears I probably had was that lack of stability. And I'm now in that lack of stability. Like I'm fully in it and experiencing it, and it's not as bad as I thought it was. It's actually great. It's like a feeling of freedom, and that feeling knowing that it can go away whenever I want it to go away. You know, I have that freedom. The possibilities are endless of where I can work, and now I have no fear. And people always ask me, like, "Are you not scared that you won't have a job? Are you not scared?" I'm like, "Not at all." Yeah, I think that the fears that I had are definitely completely gone now, and that's probably the first thing that people do ask me when they're asking about, especially after the podcast came out. I had people messaging me that had listened to the podcast saying, asking for advice. And one of the first things they'll ask is, like, are you not scared that you'll, get sick of it? Or are you not scared that you won't have a job? And I know it happens. Sometimes it does happen that schools will, can drop you as quick as they can hire you. Contracts sometimes don't last that long, or then aren't always that stable. But that doesn't scare me at all, because it is just so easy to get a job, and get a job that you like and that you're comfortable with.
Love it. Great answer. Daniel, same to you.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with what Rachel said there, and it certainly speaks to my experience as well. Whereas I've been very happily settled in one country for a long time, whereas Rachel's been all over the place in a wonderful way. Malta, Italy, Spain, Thailand, India. I'm a little bit envious, but I think it's absolutely wonderful. The fear that you have when you first come out, my fear was that I wouldn't be a very good English teacher, plain and simple, because I had no experience in the job. And the only way to get around that, am I going to be good or am I going to be crap, is to try it. And there are days when you're going to be not very good. I still have days when I have bad lessons. We all have bad days at work. But when you first come out, that fear is amplified in your mind. It's magnified because you've stepped away from the stability that Rachel's spoken so well about. But as time goes by and you find your feet, like in any new role, you become more confident, you become more experienced. Fewer and fewer things can surprise or blindside you. Even changing jobs, I've done that twice now here. There's always a little bit of instability with a job change, but the more you experience, the easier that becomes. And it sets you up where, you come to love the instability a little bit, I would hate to sign a 5-year contract right now. At the moment, we do 9-month contracts, and they're auto-renewed at my school. Pretty much, they send you out another one, and that's that. You just sign it online, and it gets sent back to HR. That's lovely. But getting over those first fears, the only way to do it, when push comes to shove, is to book your plane ticket. Is to get over there. If you can find a job before you go, great. If you can't, don't worry about it. Certainly, if you come to Southeast Asia, there's still a great value in knocking on a school's door with a paper copy of your CV. They are always happy to see you out here. And I know many people who've done that and have been invited in. They've had an interview, a quick one, and then maybe a more formal one a day later. And then, can you start on Monday is the next question. But the only way to face your fears, ultimately, is to face your fears and take that leap. And you know what, as well, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't mean your life's over. It means you've tried something. And that's more than most people will do. They'll sit on that bus, that proverbial bus with the rain kind of tapping against the windows, and a lot of people will live in that space. And I feel very, very sad for some of those people, because they're going to get to an age where they're going to feel like, I can't do this. Or I wish I'd always, I always wish I'd done this. I don't want anybody to ever wake up later in their lives with those words, I wish I'd tried this, I wish I'd done that, because that's the real heartbreak, If it doesn't work out and you think, well, no, I've tried it, but the UK is the best place for me, well done for trying, and I salute you, because at least you've tried, And if England, or the UK, sorry, is the best place for you, good. Find your home, find your drive, find your vocation. But you've got to try a few things, I think, before you realise ultimately what your calling in life is, or your vocation, or where you're going to be happiest.
You've also kind of given me a really good answer to what was going to be my next question. So Rachel gets that one now. So Rachel, what advice would you give to someone who's having this sort of heart versus head debate? Their heart says that they want to teach, they want to do what you've done, they want to move abroad, they want to experience all these things, but their head's saying, for whatever reason, just now isn't the time, it's just not right. What would you say to them?
I think I did give the same advice. You asked me a similar question the last time, and it's honestly just do it. Like, as my philosophy teacher would say, there's a reason for everything. And I've been studying yoga philosophy every day for the past 2 weeks. So that's probably why I've got my philosophy head on. But there really is. And if you're listening to this podcast and you have any inkling in your head that you want to do this, then there's a reason that you're listening to this podcast. And it was the same thing as when because I wasn't even considering being an English language teacher, and I opened Spotify and it just came up. I taught English abroad, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll just play that. I was on the train home. It just came out of nowhere, and something made me click that. And here I am now, like traveling the world, doing the things that I love, like traveling around India. If there's any tiny thing in your mind that says, I think I want to do that, just do it. And as Daniel said, it's so easy to just go home again. And, people will welcome you with open arms once you've tried it. And any doubts or fears that you have are probably things that we've covered in this episode or in our previous episodes. There's not much more. And if there are, you can go on Reddit and ask questions. You can message me yourself, message Daniel, contact anyone that you know, that if you have any fears or worries at all about it that is putting you off, because I'll make my little brother do it, I'll make my little sister do it. And if it's not teaching English, it's just going abroad and doing stuff and getting out of Ireland or out of the UK just to experience the rest of the world. And Daniel said there that you don't want to be saying when you're older, I wish I had done it, or having regrets. And that's what made me start to think about wanting to move abroad in the first place. And that's why I actually moved to Manchester out of Ireland, was because, older generations were always saying to me, like, oh, I think you always hear that when you're younger, oh, get out and travel while you're young, make sure and travel while you're young. And it kind of goes over your head sometimes. But I remember thinking, like, this lady, and she was only in her 50s, I think, said it to me one day in the office I was working in Ireland. Oh, if I was your age, I wouldn't be working here. I'd be away traveling. And I think one night I was just meditating or something, and it came to my head, like, all these people are saying the same thing. Like, if, you should do it, you should travel, you should get out. And now I see why. Like, it's indescribable with words, the things that you learn from traveling and the experiences you have. Yeah, honestly, the advice is just do it, go for it, apply for the jobs, or buy the TEFL course first, of course, do the TEFL course. I'm grateful doing my TEFL course. Like, I had fun doing it. I love learning. 100%. I was sat down every night, and it was like my little self-care was doing my TEFL course. So yeah, just buy the TEFL course. I bought it on Black Friday sales. There's a tip that I have if anybody. There's a Black Friday sale on the TEFL course. Yeah. But yeah, just buy the course, do it, and you'll get a taste for then also, teaching and stuff. But, Daniel touched on one of his fears was that he wasn't going to be a good enough teacher. And I think if you want to do it, then you're going to be a good enough teacher, because there's something in you that's making you want to do it. And, it'll just happen, and you'll take to it. And, you have the support around you. The kids are great, or even the adults that you're teaching. Everyone wants to learn, and people are there to learn, and that helps a lot as well. So yeah, just do it, I guess.
Brilliant. Absolutely amazing answer.
To what Rachel said, I think we've had a similar, almost spiritual experience. There are times in your life when the universe is sending you a message, and it comes through a million little comments, no, not a million, but a few little comments from friends, a random Spotify link. For me, before I ever came to Southeast Asia, I was listening to Spotify, doing my rounds as a local counsellor, knocking on doors, and I had the earphones in. And I heard 2 songs at random, both from Cambodian bands, and I thought, what the hell is this? This is amazing. I don't understand a word of what they're singing, but this is amazing. Looked them up and found out they were Cambodian bands. And I was getting lots of little signals, again, travel, do this, do that, and I listened. And I got on a plane. I took 40 days away. I took my iPad with me from the city council, did my casework from afar over a summer, and it changed my life. And it was because I listened to what the world was telling me, what the universe was telling me. It was in the loud moments and the quiet moments. And there are times in your life, if you're lucky enough, you get a unified message coming at you from all angles, but it's subtle and you have to listen to it. And when you do, go to TEFL.org, find the best price deal for you. They're an amazing value for money option. And I mean, joking aside, walking into.
I swear,
my
I'm not
first
paying
day,
for this. I'm not paying these guests to do this. Can't be clear enough about that.
and I walked in nervous, but I was less nervous because I felt like I had a small toolkit by my side. So, and he's definitely not paying us, I promise.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you, we can. I am happy to read the email transcript back and forth. You know, I have full transparency now. I have nothing to offer. No, thank you so much, guys. Thank you. It's been amazing. I just have one more question to ask you. That I feel it's going to be a very, very short one sentence answer, maybe even one word. But I don't know who to go to first in this. I'll let you kind of both jump in if you want to. But if you could do it all over again, would you change anything?
Yes. I do it 10 years sooner.
Okay,
Yeah,
Rachel.
I don't think I would change anything. You know, I'm a believer in everything happens at the right time, and I don't think I would do anything differently. I was gonna say I wish I finished my degree. Maybe that is actually one thing. I did drop out of university and in the end of my second year, and the only time I've ever been asked for a degree was when I wanted to teach English in Thailand. So that's probably the only thing. But would I do my experience over as far as like teaching and what I've done so far? No way. But only the small thing would be having that degree, under my arm to teach in Thailand would be nice. But I was lucky enough, I was able to teach in Malta with no degree. I could teach in Italy with no degree. I could teach all over Europe with no degree, and I could teach in Cambodia with no degree. So
That is actually a really good answer. In my mind, I sort of visualize that as like you both going nothing, and then it being an amazing soundbite. I could maybe like start the episode with that, but that's actually a lot better. So, fair play, fair play, fair play. No, it's fine. Rachel, Daniel, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you both again. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Real pleasure.